Record. All right, welcome back, everybody, to the Parsha review segment of our Living Jewishly Tuesday night class. This week's Parsha is called Parsha Shoftim. Shoftim means judges. It is the fifth portion of the book of Deuteronomy. Again, Deuteronomy is a review of the entire Torah. So a lot of the things are reviewing portions and segments of the Torah that were already in the first four books of the Torah. For example, we have the Ten Commandments listed again in previous portions. Why do we need to read? Well, this is a review. This is the last 36 days of Moshe's life, as you see on the top of your sheet, and it's preparing the Jewish people. This is the final gateway before the Jewish people are about to conquer the land of Israel. This is the 48th portion from the beginning of the Torah. 97 verses in this week's Parsha. Not such a big portion. There are 1,523 words and 5,590 letters. There are 41 mitzvahs in this week's Parsha. 41. Wow. And we've seen many portions that had few portions, as many as zero, right? But which teach us many lessons and other things that we learn. But here, that's why I didn't break it up as much into different categories, because there's so many mitzvahs that okay. Now there are 27 prohibitions as well. So I think a very big theme in this week's portion is law and order. We'll see what that means in a minute. Number one is that there should be laws and there should be order. You always have to have a judicial system, but you also have to have an executive branch which executes the laws of the land, the laws of the Jewish people. So now we see Moshe tells Bnei Yisrael to appoint judges and officers, shoftim v'shotrim, b'chol sharecha, in all of your cities. Okay. Now, a bribe of even an insignificant sum is forbidden. Why? Because bribes work. Bribes work. My brother told me that when his son was in a specific yeshiva, what he did was, the first day of the yeshiva, my brother went over to the rabbi and he handed him some cash in his hand while he was shaking his hand. He said he knew for the rest of the year his son will be taken care of. He said, I bribed him. I bribed him to pay extra attention to my son. Now, when it comes to court, that's a very big problem. Yeah. Right? Mm-hmm. Now, if you want your son's teacher to take care of him, that's maybe a smart thing, because you know what? Bribes work. And therefore, it's forbidden in the Torah to bribe a judge, or even, by the way, a rabbi of a congregation. To me, it's something that I've been, over the past couple of weeks, I was talking to my wife, my children. We're having this conversation where today you have people who are, very, very philanthropic. But I've seen over the past few years, people who have become extremely philanthropic in order to buy rabbis, so to speak. They're buying them. And I think it's wrong. I think it's a wrong practice, both from the bribe, from the giver and the recipient, not to, because then what happens if someone comes to that rabbi, if this individual who just gave him a nice, gift for his daughter's wedding, and and now he comes to ask him a rabbinic halachic question, where he's in a financial dispute with someone else, and they're coming here, my rabbi, come to my rabbi, let's let him. Is the rabbi going to recuse himself the way he should? No. Right? He may not, because you got to be very, very careful. You got to be very, very careful, because bribery works. The Torah recognizes that, which is why the Torah says it's not even an insignificant amount. But it was just nothing. I just, it's. Perhaps that's why when people tip teachers at the end of the school year, right? Mm-hmm. That's the thing. At the end of the school year, that's fair. Mm-hmm. That's just saying thank you. You can give a nice something, right? Sometimes people do that for the rabbi. I know that when I sell my chametz to the rabbi, and the rabbi sells it right before Pesach, so it's a custom then that the rabbi who does the sale for you, you give them a little something. So the rabbi in my congregation, this year when I went to him, I said, have people been giving you? He says, no. I said, well, it's a custom that this is what people do, because the rabbi also has to pay for Pesach, right? He needs
Right.
So you give something to the rabbi. And later on I checked in with him. He said that several people started doing it. I was the first. I was very happy that I was the first to get that. Okay, we have to take care of our rabbis too, and we'll see this right away. We'll see this soon because we're going to talk about the Cohen and the Levi. That the Cohen and the Levis didn't get any inheritance of the land. Why? That's for the people to support. Who are the Cohen and Levi? Those are the rabbis. That's the obligation on the community to support them. That doesn't mean that you buy them. Support them doesn't mean you buy them and own them. Okay. Trees are not to be planted near Hashem's altar, as was the way of idolaters. Idolaters would plant trees next to their altars. We don't have any type of similarities or comparisons to the idolatry, to the world of idolatry. Blemishes in animals designated for offerings and other points of disqualifications are listed in the Parsha. So an example, an animal that's missing an eye, an animal that has a broken leg, an animal that after slaughtering it, they found that it had a hole in one of the lungs. All of that renders that animal non-kosher. Sell it to Purdue, sell it to Tyson. It doesn't go to Meal Mart, right? Because Meal Mart is only kosher. And the animal is not only checked before it's slaughtered, it's checked after it's slaughtered to ensure that it's glatt. Glatt means smooth. What does it mean, smooth? That means internally they check the entire animal, the crevices, everything, to ensure that this animal was a perfectly kosher animal before and after. By the way, one of the things that they do before they slaughter an animal, is, you may know, they make the animal walk. Why do they make the animal walk? To see that it's not limping. To see that it doesn't have any ailments. You'll be able to tell from a walk. It's almost like what people do. You want to see if a person is not inebriated, right? You tell them, come walk 20 feet on a straight line, right? You can see if the person is wobbling, he's got some issues, okay? Most healthy people are able to walk in a straight line for 20 feet. But an animal as well, an animal should be able to carry itself. If it can't, there might be something wrong, something underlying. How would you know if it had a broken leg after you slaughtered it? Well, you can only check that beforehand. And that's why they usually keep them at a distance from where they slaughter them, so that they're able to do that test, at least test number one, the external test. They look around, make sure there's no cuts, there's no bruising of the animal, because that could also render it to be unkosher. But that's something which is very relevant today, which is why if you look at the kosher packing of meat, it'll say that it was washed and it was soaked and it was salted and rinsed. These are all part of the process of cleansing the animal after it was slaughtered. But before it was slaughtered, also you need to ensure. Okay, so all of that is discussed as well in this week's Parsha. The great Sanhedrin is to make binding decisions on new situations. So driving a car wasn't a topic 3,300 years ago when the Torah was given. So who are the rabbis to decide whether or not driving a car on Shabbos is or is not prohibited on Shabbos, according to Torah criteria to prevent the fragmentation of the Torah. So the authority was given to the sages of each generation to apply the Torah's rules, not our desires, the Torah's rules, the Torah's principles, to the new situations that are going to arise, and that becomes Torah. Okay, it's this is tricky, and I know that who says this? We have to check where our motives are coming from. That's the first thing, the very basic. Those who are knowledgeable in the world of conservative Judaism's writings, so they I believe it was the 1960s is when they wrote their first responsa regarding driving on Shabbos, which a few short years later they retracted, saying it was a total mistake, and no one is permitted under any circumstances to drive to synagogue. Well, here's my thing. How can such a massive mistake be made?
Well, they don't believe that the Torah is divine.
Well, one second. Let me tell you what the motive was, and that's the issue. The issue was the motive. The issue is that they realized that if they don't allow driving, they're going to lose membership. And who is the God? Membership is God, right? Because if we don't have membership, we don't have members. And if we don't have members, we close our doors. So we have to preserve membership. The only way to preserve members, not to bleed out to the reform movement, is we have to allow them to drive. A few years later, they realized that was a huge mistake because you know what happened? It got worse. The conservative movement. It got worse because, one second, why should I live next to my conservative synagogue if I can just live in Katy and drive in? Because now they said it's okay. So if it's okay to drive in only for synagogue, not for cleaners, not for movies, not for anything else, only for synagogue. But we know that that's not the case anymore. Right? So I'll move out to any place, and as long as I can drive in, it's fine. And then the reality kicks in is that, you know what, I'm tired, I can't, this and that. What happens, one thing leads to another, and they lost on both sides. Yes, sir.
Do you believe that there's like an objectivity to that, or do you feel like they each like play their role in the greater spectrum of, let's call it modern Judaism?
Yes.
What was the question?
Okay, I'm going to repeat the question. He was asking whether or not there is objectivity with regard to modernizing Judaism to the generation. Okay,
Sure.
so repeat.
I'm saying like you have the Reform and conservative Jews. They all kind of like play a role in the greater spectrum of things. Do you agree with that? And if not, do you feel like one is wrong and one is?
Okay, so it's a tricky question. Whether or not there is something right and or wrong in any of those movements.
But
Right. So here's the thing. I don't believe there's any such thing as a Reformed Jew or an Orthodox Jew or conservative Jew. I've said this, and I the more I say it, the more I believe it. I really, really do. I don't think there's a single person who is a Reformed Jew or an Orthodox Jew or conservative Jew. I believe that we can break down Judaism into two different categories of people: growing Jews and stagnant Jews. And I believe that every person should aspire to be among the growing Jews. And that, by the way, from every category, every movement, so to speak, they should be from the growing. I know many people. I grew up Torah observant. I don't like to use the word Orthodox. I grew up Torah observant, and I've seen many people in my community who are stagnant Jews, sadly. And I've seen many people who grew up without any Judaism who are growing Jews. And that's the beautiful thing, is that every Jew needs to be a growing Jew. That's the bottom line. So where we affiliate, where we pay membership dues is irrelevant. Completely irrelevant. But we have to recognize that the world is a very rapidly changing and progressing in many, many different ways. And as such, halacha does as well. But the principles don't change. The principles don't change. So if you talk about a car has something called a spark plug. So when someone turns the key, it ignites a spark, which is a biblical prohibition of the Torah. It's not like a maybe. Now, some could say, well, it's a secondary action because you're turning the key, that's striking something else, which strikes something else. And because it's a secondary action or a tertiary action, then it's not considered as, yeah, but you got to be very careful with that. It's not, so the fundamental principles of halacha are there. The question is whether or not a person or a movement wants to abide by it. But we have bigger issues because there are movements that are openly saying that they don't believe that the Torah was given to the Jewish people on Mount Sinai to begin with. And
that's absurd.
That's absurd in your opinion. In their opinion, it's not absurd, right? In their opinion, it's not.
In your opinion?
In my opinion, of course it's absurd. It's the craziest thing. It's like you don't believe in the Torah. Hello, I open up the Torah right here, and we open up to Exodus 20, and the Torah says very clear the Jewish people stood at the foot of Mount Sinai. If you don't believe in that, you don't believe in anything. So you can start a new religion.
But we've had people in your class who don't believe in that, yet they're still in the class.
That's great that they're in the class. They're in the right place. Where else should they go? right? If they're not coming to this class, where are they going to be learning? That's what we're here for. We're here to educate and to learn and to grow and to you know what? And let him challenge us. And we'll challenge him back. This is what the Torah is about. The Torah is not about everybody believing exactly in the same way. You know, I had a guy who I was learning with, and you never know what's going to impact someone. I was learning with this guy. He's a high-profile attorney in Houston. Okay, I come to his office every Tuesday morning at 6:30 in the morning, which is very early for me. Okay, 6:30 in the morning. I mean, I had to leave my house at about 5:45, 5:30 because he did not work over here in this area. He worked further in town, and I'd get to his office 6:30, and we would learn every Tuesday morning, 6:30 to 7:30, before he'd have his depositions, and before he'd read all his legal documents, whatever it is that he was dealing with. Again, this guy is a big, very busy attorney. Okay. So after several years that I've been learning with him, my father was visiting town. My parents were visiting town. My parents met with this individual many times. My father says to me, he's like, I've seen you here so many times, and I know you learn with my son all the time. He says, has anything changed in your life? Has one thing changed in your life that you've been learning all this time? He says, I'll be honest with you. Nothing changed in my life. Except last Saturday night, we did what we've been doing for decades. My wife and I, and whoever's with us, we go every Saturday night and we eat shellfish. He says, that's our family tradition. He says, last Saturday night, we were waiting to be seated. And he said, I turned to my wife and I said to her, I don't know why, but something doesn't feel right about us eating shellfish anymore. He said to my father, he didn't even say this to me. I never heard it from him. I heard it from my father. Okay. The truth is, he told it to me later, but he said, he turned to his wife and he said, shellfish is never going to cross these lips again. Okay. So I'm asking you, is this person a rabbi? Is he a Reformed Jew? Is he an Orthodox Jew? Is he a conservative Jew? Who cares? He's a growing Jew. That's what counts, right? So to me, the question is a good question, but I think that we need to realize what's the motive always behind people trying to change things in the Torah. The Torah is as modern as the world is. It's much more advanced. And you see things that are written in the Torah that are like, one second, the Torah realized that there's something. Yes, because Hashem created sound waves. Hashem created like everything that you could possibly imagine. Who created it? The creator of the universe, who in his own Torah says that the Torah is the blueprint for the world. So everything that was created from the Torah already. So it's, yes, if someone doesn't believe, and I don't care who the rabbi is or what movement they affiliate with, anybody who's willing to say that they don't believe the Jewish people received the Torah at Mount Sinai, such a person we need to cry for. And we need to pray that they get some sense in their mind and that they realize that the Torah is a binding document with the Jewish people.
Some people don't live up to that.
No, that's a secondary thing. I'm not saying that just because someone believes in the veracity of the Torah, the truth of the Torah, that they necessarily observe it. Right? I had a guy. I just met the guy this morning when I was in Dallas. I was in the hotel. I was waiting for my daughter to finish her breakfast. I did the research before she came down of exactly what was kosher. I said those bagels are Lender's bagels. They're kosher. The cream cheese all had the symbol. The jelly had the jam had the kosher symbol on it. The orange juice was good. The milk was good. I already did, and all of these cereals were good. So my daughter came down. I knew exactly what was. I said, this is good. This is good. This is not good. This is good. Whatever. I told her everything was there. And I'm just sitting there and waiting. We're schmoozing, talking over breakfast. And a guy walks in and he says, Shalom. So I said, Shalom to you. How are you? He says, I'm Jewish and I'm from St. Louis. I see he had this St. Louis Cardinals t-shirt on him. I said, it was a giveaway. So he says, I grew up in a religious home. He says, I believe in it, but I'm not very good at observing it. That's a different thing. And that the Torah recognizes that someone has let me ask you, what's the difference between the following two different scenarios? Okay, a guy who doesn't believe in speed limits and a guy who believes in speed limits, but just sometimes he breaks the speed limit. What's the difference between them?
The law.
One guy is a total danger to society because he doesn't believe in laws, right? He doesn't believe in any laws. He's sorry, it's a recommendation. Red light is a recommendation. It doesn't mean anything. Other guys like, I believe in the speed limit, but sometimes I get carried away. I get to make a mistake. That right? So the difference is that if someone believes in the Torah, so now, okay, so it's normal for a person to have certain challenges. I don't observe everything in the Torah. I've made many mistakes in my life. So what? Doesn't make me a bad person. Doesn't make anybody a bad person. But there's a difference if I don't believe in it completely versus when I believe in it and sometimes make mistakes. That's normal.
Why is there controversy about the state of Israel existing?
Oh, now we're getting into politics.
Is that what it is?
The question here was, why are there people who have a disagreement about Israel?
Existing.
So do you know?
For another day.
It's for another day, but I'll just answer the question. Okay, the Reform movement in their platform when they started back in, I believe it was in Berlin in 1809. Part of their platform is that we don't believe in Israel and we don't believe in Jerusalem because Germany is our Israel and Berlin is our Jerusalem. And that's why they took out of their, means they don't believe in it. They don't need a state of Israel because they believe. Again, I don't think that modern day Reform rabbis have any clue what's written in the original documents of Reform movement.
Some Orthodox rabbis that didn't
No,
believe
that's
in the state
only
of Israel
that's
because
only
the Messiah
Satmar.
hasn't come.
It's only Satmar. Satmar. It's one of the largest Hasidic dynasties, and the reason he was there opposed is because of the secularism of the Zionists. That's the only reason. Is because their intention to bring Jews was to bring Jews to a Jewish state, but not a Jewish religious state. And when they brought people in, they brought them in with the intention for them to be secularized, not to maintain their Judaism. Today, that whole movement is gone. It's gone. It's completely been eradicated, right? I don't think there's a single.
Satmar now?
No.
Do they...
So Satmar hasn't modified themselves yet, right? Because they think that it's still existent. Those.
The Israeli side of that we got to make.
Correct. I don't think because the Rabbi passed away before that type of Zionism died.
Yeah.
So if the rabbi never changed his decree, nothing's changing. So you have many. That doesn't mean that they don't do business there. That doesn't mean that they don't give money to Israel, and that doesn't mean that they don't live there. They do live there, and they pay their taxes, and they're involved with everything else. The ones who are shaking hands with Arafat and Mahmoud Abbas, and all of those other crazies, those are just insane people, and we know that every neighborhood has crazy people, and every religion has crazy people, and every group of people has crazy people. We also have our share of crazies, and those are our crazies, and that I'm saying unapologetically. The people who are shaking hands with those terrorists and visiting the mothers of terrorists who are killed in their line of terrorism, and going to comfort the mourners, the mothers, they're sick in their head. They're absolutely sick in their head, and that's not nothing to be.
Didn't mean to divert.
No, it's not. Everything is on the table here. So okay. So now we're all over the place. Laws. Okay. So now it's very important. There's a difference between believing and not observing versus not observing. It means I believe that the majority of people are in their mind Torah observant, except that they don't always observe it, but they believe in it. Okay, there's a very big difference between someone saying I don't believe in it and it's nonsense versus I believe in it. I'm not there yet, and that's fear, right? So I had a student of mine. This is way back, probably 2007, when Facebook had on the profile, it would say your name, your age, date of birth, if you wanted to share that. And it would also have school and it would have religion. Right? Today, it's not it's not acceptable for anybody to put a statement on religion. Let's just that. Okay, fine. Either way, so I had a student of mine. I get a notification that he changed his religious status, and I looked at it, and it said that he's a conservative Jew. Now, he used to say Reformed Jew. Now he said conservative Jew. I called him up and I said, "Hey, what's going on, Joe Schmo? I just noticed on your Facebook that you changed your religious affiliation. What's going on?" He says, "Well, Rabbi, Reformed Jews don't believe in the Torah. I believe in the Torah. I just don't observe it. So I'm not Reform anymore. I got to be conservative." I said, "Why? Why can't you just write, I'm an aspiring Jew?" Right? You don't have to put yourself in a label. And that's, I think, the biggest mistake is that we have labels and we're categorizing labels. No labels. I'm an aspiring Jew, trying to do the best I can to improve every day. That's it. I don't need to put myself in any single box. I'm not an Orthodox Jew. I'm telling you that right now. I'm not an Orthodox Jew. I'm a striving Jew every day, trying to grow and take a step forward in my Judaism. That's it. That's my label. All right? Yes.
I would just want to maybe give you some perspective or color from a different angle.
Sure. I'd love to hear your perspective.
For me, I would dream to be more observant and to follow everything. But in order for me to do that, I'd have to sleep over your house in 7 days a week, man. And I'd have to observe you and study under you very intimately for a year, 2 years, 3 years.
And what's stopping you from doing that?
But that's not I don't want to say, it's not about practicality, but in terms of just that would be a major shift.
It is. It definitely is a major shift.
Changed a lot of things.
Let me tell you a story. Okay, I'll save the story for after class. Well, keep it on, but I'll turn off the recording. But remind me of the story of the guy who had an 8-year journey of transformation. 8 years.
I come hang out with you.
Okay, so I'm just telling you, it's not a quick thing. I tell this to rabbis around the world when I do this training.
Wrong,
no, God forbid. All right.
Sorry, but I have to keep it real. Sorry.
I appreciate it, Mark. All right, so a very learned scholar who refuses to accept the halachic decisions of the Sanhedrin incurs the death penalty. When the Sanhedrin, which is the Jewish court, says this is the law and you don't accept it, we've got some problems there. A Jewish king may have possessions and symbols of power only as commensurate with the honor of his office, but not for self-aggrandizement. He can't do things for his own personal honor. He has to do it for the honor of his position. Also, a king has to write himself 2 Torah scrolls. One is to be kept with him wherever he goes, that he doesn't become haughty. The Torah recognizes you become a governor, you become a senator, you become a congressman, you become a president. Arrogance. Oh, arrogance. Right? And don't tell me that there hasn't been a president who wasn't a big shot. Okay? Because every president, right? Every people say, oh, this guy's got such bad character traits. Tell me what president didn't have bad character traits. They all did. Yeah. They all had very shady lifestyles and things that were going on in the back. Okay, so everybody's got it, and anybody who feels that they're good enough to be president of the United States or any country, okay, might have some issues on that side of them. Okay, neither the Kohanim nor the Levim, this is what we mentioned earlier, are to inherit land in the land of Israel. Rather, they are to be supported by the community by a system of tithes. We mentioned this previously in other portions, how the tithes would support the Levites, certain tithes would support the Kohanim. Yes.
Could they purchase land? Didn't Jeremiah purchase land?
Yes, but they could purchase land, but the land went back to its original owner at the Jubilee. So yes, they can lease an apartment. That's not a problem, but that lease would be over. My in-laws own an apartment in Jerusalem, and in their contract they have that when Messiah comes, it's called the Messiah clause, and when Messiah comes, the tenant has 30 days to vacate the premises so that my in-laws can regain possession of the home of their it's a clause in the contract, a signed contract that that when Mashiach comes, we hope he comes every day. We hope and pray that he comes every day. That they have 30 days from that point to vacate.
So when he comes, it's not that quick, huh?
Well,
I mean, if you have 30 days to.
you
that
can't
quick,
tell someone get out
I
today,
understand, but
right?
Is he gonna be here with us for a while or
Apparently.
10,000 years?
Yes, it will be a long period of time, and it'll be a time of absolute bliss. It'll be peace in the world. There'll be value systems. There'll be a recognition that God is creator of heaven and earth among everyone, and there'll be great reward for those who did the right thing, and for those who didn't, there'll be a great shame. We can talk about it another time. I think Rabbi Yaakov Wolbe has a podcast on the era of Mashiach as well. All divination is prohibited. So any type of seance, any of those types of hiji-biji stuff is prohibited by the Torah. You're not allowed to get. There is a world of dark magic and all of that, and that's a world that God says, I don't want my children to be involved with that. Stay away from it. Okay? Just by the way, if you want to know, because you're asking. There are letters of the alphabet that can bring someone to life and put someone to death and can build the world and can destroy the world and can bring great fortune and great misfortune. All letters of the alphabet combined, read in a certain way. Now, we don't know all those secrets. Moses knew all of those. Okay? The great prophets knew all of those. We are limited to that. It takes great Kabbalists, people who are great scholars in the world of the hidden that can decipher those things. But it's not what even that, Torah says, Tamim tieh masham elokecha, be innocent and pure, be simple in front of God. Don't be such a, dealing with all the hidden world. Hashem promises the Jewish people that he will send them prophets to guide them. And Moshe explains how a true prophet may be distinguished from a false one. If you remember when we did our 13 principles of faith from the Rambam, we discussed how we decipher how we can distinguish between a true and false prophet. So there are many, 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 many parts to that, but the Torah gives us the grounds for that. Cities of refuge are to be provided for an accidental killer to escape the blood avenger from the descendants, from the deceased family. However, someone who kills with malice is to be handed over to the blood avenger. What is going on here? If someone is climbing up a ladder, by mistake, falls down, lands on someone, and kills him. Totally by mistake. And the family is out to kill this guy, right? The accidental killer. The accidental killer runs to the city of refuge. As long as he's within the parameters of the city of refuge, no one is allowed to touch him. If he leaves, they have free hand to take revenge. What gets him free from that, so to speak, prison? If the Kohen Gadol, if the high priest dies. Which is why the Talmud tells us that the mother of the high priest would stitch garments, and she would bake foods, pastries, and food for all of those people in the city of refuge. You wonder what's going on here. Who are these people? These are all the killers, mistaken killers, erroneous killers, right? Accidental killers. But these all have blood on their hands. And these are the guys you're worried about. The mother is going to feed them and to dress them so that they don't pray that her son dies. These are the people you're worried about? Sages tell us yes. Someone who sincerely prays to God, God listens. Even if they have a checkered past. Even if they had blood on their hands. Their prayers are always accepted. Got to be prayer is very powerful. So what the mother would do is she would make it so enticing for them to stay in the city of refuge that they shouldn't pray for the Kohen Gadol to die. Okay, so that's a little bit about that. Now, someone who did kill intentionally, hand him over to the blood avenger, to the family. And now they can chop him up, make him into a salad. Okay. Moshe cautions Bnei Yisrael not to move boundary markers to increase their property. Be very careful.
Rabbi, I have a question
Yes,
about
sure.
what you just said. I thought they had to go through a whole court process, and then the court executes them, not the blood avenger.
The court can execute them if there were witnesses. There are no witnesses. What are you going to do?
But how can you, as a blood avenger, avenge him if he's not been tried and convicted in the court?
That's true. What's if he says, I killed him? Now, what are you going to do?
You're not.
I
able,
killed
you're
him.
You're
Right.
not able to accept a confession on a capital offense in Judaism.
Okay, so that's a good question. It's a good question.
Only a lawyer would
Okay.
give you that answer.
The Talmud talks about it. All right. So Moshe cautions Bnei Yisrael. Moshe cautions the Jewish people not to move boundary markers to increase their property. This is basics of property law, right? You can't move your fence over 4 inches to, and then the next time you replace your fence for the next storm, you add another 4 inches, and before you know it, you moved it a couple feet, and now you have more property. That's why we have property markers. Every property has a property marker, which is identified when you survey the land. 2 witnesses who conspire to frame a third party are to be punished with the very same punishment that they conspired to bring upon the innocent party. So an example, there are 4 examples given in the Talmud where they do not receive the same punishment, but they get a different punishment in lashes, but all the others get the same punishment. Okay, and those that don't get those 4 punishments is ones that the Torah specifically says that only a person guilty of this sin gets that punishment, not the people who are fraudulent witnesses. They don't get that same punishment. Okay, so a Kohen is to be anointed specifically for when Israel goes to war, to instill the nation's trust in Hashem. And among those disqualified from going to war is anyone who has built a new house but not lived in it yet, or anyone who is fearful or faint-hearted, or anyone who built a new house. There's also someone who recently got married. Okay, that's part of someone who built a new house. But someone who's faint-hearted, you have doubts, meaning you don't have enough belief, trust in Hashem. We don't want you here. Don't be part of our team. You're not part of the fighters. Fighters have no questions of their faith. They have no questions of that they're going to be successful because Hashem is behind them. An enemy must be given the chance to make peace. But if they refuse, all the males are to be killed. We saw this when Joshua came to the land of Israel. They proposed, either you guys leave peacefully or we're going to kill you. Right? 7 out of 8 nations decided to fight against the Jewish people and were wiped out. Right? You got to give them a chance. We're offering you a peace deal. We'll escort you with all of your goods. We'll help you out. We'll get you new land. But this is the land of Israel that was promised by God to the Jewish people. We're here to take it now. If you don't want it, you want to fight us, no problem. It'll be at a heavy price. Fruit trees are to be preserved and not cut down during the siege. Okay, this is another thing. In general, we don't cut down fruit trees. Trees that produce fruit, we don't cut down. What do you do if you have an apple tree going into your house? It's going to ruin your house. It's going to ruin that. You're not allowed to cut it, but a non-Jew is allowed to cut it. And that you can ask your gardener, tell him, this tree is a little problematic, and he'll understand that you need to cut it. If a corpse is found between cities, it's a very, very big topic. The elders of the nearest city must take a heifer, slaughter it, and wash their hands over it, saying that it is not our guilt. It is not that they are not guilty of the death. What's going on here is that they find a corpse. The question is, why is he dead over here between these 2 cities? So our sages tell us is that it was a lack of care or concern that caused this person to die, and therefore the offering is an atonement for the city. If someone would have cared for him more, he wouldn't have died of thirst. They would have given him an extra water bottle. If someone would have cared for him, he would have had extra food packed up, right? But they didn't, so he died of hunger, right? And that's why they brought this offering as a special atonement for this grave injustice that was done to this individual. What's very beautiful about our community here is that whenever we have people collecting charity, they come to Houston from wherever it is, from Israel, from wherever, any place in the world, and they come knocking door to door. Every time they come to my house, I ask them, would you like something to drink? And my kids know immediately. They run and get a water bottle, and sometimes they'll ask for something specific. I want juice, or I'm on a special diet. I can only have tea or coffee, or whatever it is. But we'll always offer them a drink. And I've heard them say so many times that you have such a beautiful community. Every single house, I knock on the door, they ask me if I had something to eat or drink. And that's the way we should be as a people. We should be those who are always seeking to ensure that someone comes your way, don't send them empty-handed. Give them whatever you give them charity. That's irrelevant. But make sure that they have the basics to exist another 2 hours, or another 3 hours. So they have a place to sleep. They have food to eat. My dear friends, that concludes today's summary of Parsha Shoftim, the 5th portion of the book of Deuteronomy. And I look forward to seeing all y'all on Friday at the Talmud class. Thank you and have a great Shabbos, everyone.
Thanks, Rabbi Wolbe.
Thanks, Aryeh.
Excellent, Rabbi. Excellent as always.